Good morning, this is Lisa, CEO of Site for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News. I cannot tell you how exciting this week has been. Members have returned on Wednesday and Thursday, and volunteers returned on Monday. Millbrook House has come alive again with people, smiles, happy faces, and people genuinely pleased to see each other. Thank you so much to all the members and indeed the volunteers, 41 of whom turned up on Monday for the volunteers party. On Wednesday, we had coffee and cake and with a chat with all the ladies and the gentlemen turning up. And on Thursday, we had the mix and mingle group and the minibus was taken out for the first time. It was a long journey though. Unfortunately, the traffic in Sandown was pretty busy. But everybody arrived and we had the grand opening of Mel Barnes's bench. Mel was a volunteer with us for 25 years and indeed started the Striders group and worked with the handicraft group. He will be sorely missed. The girls on Thursday clubbed together and they bought him a bench which now sits very proudly at Millbrook House. The bench was made by a disabled group on the island and it is a really unique and interesting design with, for example, curved corners so as not to have any sharp edges to knock into. Next week again we have activities on Wednesday and Thursday and we're hoping to restart the swimming soon as we finally receive notice back of availability from the pools. Please never hesitate to give 522205 a call and we can walk you through what activities are coming up. For example, next Thursday's Mix and Mingle has a theme of friendship as it is World Friendship Day on the 1st of August and we are organising craft activities for everybody to join in with. Obviously, there is always help on hand and for the Thursday group, for example, we also organise transport door to door. I very much hope that everybody is well and enjoying this beautiful set of sunshine. Thank you, Lisa, CEO.
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from Isle of Wight Radio, headlined Lack of Dentists, one of Isle of Wight's biggest health inequalities. The lack of dentists on the Isle of Wight has been dubbed one of the island's biggest health inequalities. An investigation from Health Watch Isle of Wight, that's HW, found nearly 1 in 4 people who responded to their questionnaire had been told to register with dentists on the mainland as no island practice was accepting new patients. In the 24 months leading up to the end of 2019, only 54.2% of children and 50.6% of adults had accessed a dentist, and it was increasingly difficult to find one, a meeting of the Isle of Wight Council Health and Social Care Scrutiny Committee had heard. One respondent to the survey said, "Every single appointment has been cancelled an hour before. I desperately need multiple tooth extraction and dentures, unable to eat properly. My teenage son has not seen a dentist for almost 5 years since we moved to the island." The watchdog is also cautious about the effect poor dental health can have on people's quality of life, leading to serious and devastating consequences on their diet, confidence and ability to work and maintain relationships. The data demonstrates, HW said, that the entire local population are not accessing dental services anywhere close to the recommended intervals, and that the current island provision needs to be close to doubled to provide the level of dentistry required. Joanna Smith, HW manager, speaking at the meeting on Monday, said, "This is one of the biggest health inequalities the island faces. If you have the money, you can get treatment tomorrow. If not, you cannot, and it is only an emergency." The report says people have told the watchdog they have gone into debt to pay for essential dental care. People have had to decline or in some cases not seek treatment as it is unaffordable to them. Emergency dentists have also become a concern, with people reporting difficulty accessing the service, resulting in some people living in extreme pain. Councillor Karen Lucioni said she had terrible toothache for over a year before she was forced to get the issue sorted privately, but in that time 3 dentists left the practice before she was seen. Although it is a national issue, HW said it was important to note that travelling to another county for a dentist is not something many island residents can do, as it is not practical nor affordable, further compounding the issue. HW says it has repeatedly raised concerns with NHS England, which commissions the dentists on the island, but were initially dismissed, but over the years the issue has only deteriorated. In its report, HW said it has now been told there is a lack of provision and a new oral needs assessment will need to be completed, but it is not a current priority.
Planning officers recommend approval for 473 homes on Last Dairy Farm in Ryde. From On the Wight, Iona. Here's why the officers think the application for 473 homes at Westridge Farm should be approved next week. Conditional approval has been recommended to controversial housing plans in Ryde, despite a petition, 570 objections and human rights concerns. Set to be discussed at the Isle of Wight Council's Planning Committee next week, the development of Westridge Farm into Westacre Park has been partially determined by planning officers. Ryde's Last Dairy Farm. The major development would see Ryde's Last Dairy Farm turned into 473 houses, a cafe with public toilets, doctor's surgery, office space, and 10 hectares of natural green space. National planning policies say 35% of the houses will need to be affordable in a mixture of 166 1, 2 and 3 bed properties. The remaining 307, as proposed by applicants, Westridge Village, Isle of Wight, part of Captiva Homes, will be for private sale as 2, 3 and 4 bed properties. Section 106 agreement. Should the approval be granted, a Section 106 agreement would provide allotments, 3 public rights of way, improvements to highways, including at Westridge Cross and the junction between Smallbrook Lane and Great Preston Road, as well as nearly £1.7 million towards a children's services or education facility. Heavy objection. The plans have been met with 570 objections, including from local councillors and the Isle of Wight's Conservative MP Bob Seeley, and more than 4,700 people signing a petition to save the farm. Main points of concern included the inadequate infrastructure of Ryde and the island, the impact on highways and the traffic generation, and the overdevelopment of the site. Ryde Town Council completed its consultation and found although new housing was required, it should be affordable and for residents. However, there was a strong feeling that the proposed site was not suitable. Community farm proposals. The Town Council voted earlier this month to support the idea of Westridge Farm becoming a community farm and to apply to the Isle of Wight Council for it to be listed as a community asset. Deputy Mayor of Ryde, Jenna Sabine, told the council meeting of the heartbreaking personal side of the development, which could see farming family The Holidays lose their home and business, despite signing an agricultural tenancy agreement in the 1960s, which allowed 3 generations of farmers to be on the land. Numerous commentators said the scheme should be built on brownfield land and the farmland protected, but the Isle of Wight Council officer's report said it was determined the development would be appropriate and sustainable for the land. Officers said the land quality was good to moderate, but only 8.875 hectares of the best and most versatile agricultural land would be lost, which was not acceptable. It had also suggested that building on the land would breach the Holidays' human rights and the right to respect for private and family life. But officers said that although it was an emotive issue, having balanced the benefits of the development and the under-provision of housing on the island, the principle of housing was acceptable. Another issue was whether the houses would be available to islanders. And while officers said the private dwellings could not be gated, the 166 affordable units would be available firstly to those in Ryde, then neighbouring parishes, as well as being made available on the island's Home Finder website. The Council's Planning Committee will meet next Tuesday, the 27th of July, to determine the application.
Hello, this is Sue reading an article from the Island Echo. Council to offer free cycle training to over 600 children this year. Up to 600 children will learn to cycle safely on island roads this year thanks to the Isle of Wight Council's new team of cycling instructors. The announcement comes following a £14,575 cash injection from the Department of Transport as part of a government aim to offer cycle training for children and their families across England. The newly qualified instructors will teach children road safety skills under the National Bikeability Cycling Proficiency Scheme. Welcoming the news, Councillor Phil Jordan, Cabinet Lead for Transport and Infrastructure, said, "This is great news for the island youngsters. This training will give them the confidence they need to cycle to school. It will give children important road safety skills to carry through to adult and may encourage parents to swap the car for a bike and to join them." Nude cycling instructor Dan Story from East Cowes said, "I've always felt like I wanted to try to give something back to the community. I saw this as a fantastic opportunity to try to inspire the next generation of cyclists. I've loved every minute of doing this so far. Seeing the kids smiling when cycling around the playground or overcoming their fears when out on the road makes it all worthwhile. If I can teach children how to ride on the roads and grow their confidence, the children can encourage their parents to ride with them. Getting some family bikeability sessions can help inspire generations of a family to cycle safely together. Understanding the rules of the road and following them makes the road a safer place for all road users." Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Lead for Environment, added, "If youngsters cycle more often to school with their parents, not only will it benefit their health, but it would also benefit the environment, improving air quality and reducing carbon emissions."
This is Den reading an article from On the Wight. Yes, Pier toll is stopping, but every standard FastCat ticket price will increase. Wight Link are announcing that they will stop charging the £1.30 toll for each car driving up Pier, but standard tickets will have an additional charge levied against them. The Pier toll is ending from Wednesday the 21st of July. Wight Link is changing the way it finances the maintenance and refurbishment of Britain's oldest working pier as a result of customer feedback and to reduce traffic congestion. The pier toll was introduced to fund maintenance of the 207-year-old listed structure. It costs around £250,000 a year to keep the pier in a safe working condition. Removing barriers will reduce delays. Wight Link Chief Executive Keith Greenfield says, "Abolishing the toll and removing the barrier will reduce delays for people waiting to drive up to the FastCat terminal, making for an easier journey, especially for commuters. Instead of a £1.30 pier toll per vehicle, there will now be a supplement of 50p to the price of individual FastCat journeys. Multi-link, season ticket and business pass holders will not be affected."
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Isle of Wight Radio, headlined "Ryde Residents in Uproar Over Simeon Wreck Car Park Plans." Ryde residents say that they are astonished at plans to turn Simeon Recreation Ground into a temporary car park, which looks set to go ahead. Concerns have been raised about flooding and unsuitable access to the site. The wreck has been prone to major flooding in the past and already has a flood defence wall installed. Letters have been sent to residents by Southern Water and the Isle of Wight Council, who are trying to find alternative parking arrangements as a result of sewage repair works at Apley. The letter states the recreation ground, which is often used by dog walkers and sports teams, is the most viable option due to its location. It says, "The site will be turned into a car park holding up to 200 vehicles on Friday 23rd of July. It reads, "As a result of the collapsed sewer on Apley seafront, Apley Longstay Car Park is currently not in use, and we are aware that in time for the peak season, an alternative car parking solution must be put in place. After much consultation and investigation, Simeon Street Recreation Ground is deemed as being the most viable option, due to its proximity to the beach and other amenities, and also as its size allows for a proposed 200 spaces. It's anticipated that this will be from the 23rd of July 2021 during the busy summer period, but will be reviewed if it is not being used. Southern Water has worked with Isle of Wight Council and Ryde Town Council, who are supportive of these alternative arrangements, to ensure a successful summer season. In partnership with Island Roads, traffic management changes will be put in place to allow a control the flow of traffic. In terms of site management, car parking operatives will be on site daily to control the incoming and outgoing traffic. Payments will be made either through the Pay by Phone app or a temporary ticket machine located within the recreation ground. We are really sorry for the inconvenience that this might cause, but hope you will appreciate working to minimise disruption as much as possible whilst we work together to mitigate the impact of the ongoing repair works. Concerned resident Neil Smith told Isle of Wight Radio, "Many concerned residents and users of the green space have been astonished and surprised by this letter. The use of the ground was, and always has been, for the children of Ryde to be able to pursue their leisure activities, especially during the summer holidays. The access and egress to and from the ground is unsuitable, a gravel track with single file access defined by protected trees. The ground is low-lying and prone to flooding in inclement weather. Only this last week did the torrential downpour flood the land up to several inches in a matter of minutes. The redesignation of the land as a flood defence area, carried out in 2018, would compromise the defence system, and flash flooding is therefore likely to occur to properties surrounding the ground. The use of the ground as an emergency helicopter or Queen's Flight landing ground is likely to be compromised if it is used as a 200-space car park."
Coronavirus restrictions are lifted in England. From Isle of Wight Radio, Iona. England's coronavirus restrictions have been lifted, although some settings on the Isle of Wight, including ferries, want people to continue to wear face coverings. Prime Minister Boris Johnson told a Downing Street news conference earlier this month that he hoped the national changes will be irreversible, but very exceptional circumstances, like a new variant of coronavirus, could mean the reintroduction of some measures. He's warned that the pandemic isn't over and that we cannot simply revert instantly to life as it was before COVID. But most of the restrictions have governed our lives for more than a year no longer apply. Whitelink, Red Funnel and Hover Travel are all asking people to still wear masks while on board, while some supermarkets also have their own policies. So what has changed? Masks are now voluntary in settings, including shops, hospitality and public transport. People will be told to exercise their personal judgment. While the legal requirement to cover your nose and mouth will be lifted, the government's still advising people to wear them in crowded spaces like on buses, trains and trams. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has said that Transport for London will continue to enforce the wearing of face masks on services in the capital. England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, has said he will continue to wear a face mask inside and in some outdoor settings where social distancing isn't possible. He also said he'd wear a mask if required to by any competent authority and as a point of common courtesy to others who may feel uncomfortable. The Prime Minister himself told a Downing Street news briefing, "Guidance will suggest where you might choose to do so, especially when cases are rising and where you come into contact with people you don't usually meet in enclosed spaces, such as obviously crowded public transport." Social distancing and hospitality. All businesses that had been closed, including nightclubs, will be able to reopen with no limits on capacity. Mass events like music festivals can resume. Singing in church will be allowed and there'll be no limit on the number of people at weddings and funerals. Customers in pubs will be able to walk to the bar to be served there. And there'll be no requirement to scan a QR code when entering a restaurant, gym or any other venue. Nor will businesses be required to collect customers' contact tracing details, although they may wish to do so if they choose. But companies who organise large-scale events like festivals are encouraged to use so-called COVID passports to record proof of a negative coronavirus test or full vaccination before entry. These will be voluntary at first, but could become legal as time goes on, according to the Prime Minister. Supporting Test and Trace is a good thing, Downing Street has said, and the NHS app will still be used, although it'll be made more proportionate under the new changes. The 1 metre plus rule on social distancing will be lifted, except in specific circumstances, like at a border, where people from red and amber list countries will still be stopped from mingling with each other. Rewarding entertaining at home, house parties will no longer be outlawed. Self-isolation. A requirement to isolate after testing positive or coming into contact with an affected person remains in place for those who are not fully vaccinated. But as previously announced by the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, those who are double jabbed, as well as under 18s in England, will no longer have to isolate if they come into close contact with COVID from August the 16th. The only caveat is that individuals must allow 2 weeks to pass after having their second jab before they are exempt. Nevertheless, if someone who's received 2 jabs tests positive for coronavirus, they will still have to isolate for the allotted 10-day period. Care homes. The limit on visitor numbers has been dropped, but there will be a limit on the number of visits per day, and infection control measures will remain in place. Working from home. The requirement for people to work from home, if possible, has been dropped. Asked if there would be a legal right not to go into work if someone's concerned about their health, the Prime Minister's spokesman said the government was not introducing any new employment rights. Quarantine-free travel and school isolation. The school bubble system will be scrapped in England from August the 16th. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson said children who are contacted by Track and Trace as being a contact of someone who's tested positive will be advised to take a PCR test, but will only have to isolate if they are positive. Secondary and college pupils will be required to take 2 tests on site at the start of the autumn term and continue to take 2 tests a week at home until the end of September, when the policy will be reviewed. From the autumn term, teachers who are fully vaccinated can remain in school if a close contact tests positive. Boris Johnson said that there's no easy answer to the obvious date for easing restrictions, but the school holidays and warmer weather act as a natural firebreak. International travel. UK residents who are fully vaccinated, 14 days since their final dose, no longer have to isolate when returning to England from green or amber list countries. They still have to take a test 3 days before returning and take a PCR test on day 2, but not on day 8 as previously required. There are different rules for travellers coming from France, though. Children under 18 and people who are taking part in COVID clinical trials no longer have to isolate or take an 8-day test. Travellers who are not fully vaccinated must still take a pre-departure test, quarantine for 10 days on returning to England, and take day 2 and day 8 tests. The government has lifted the advice to not travel to amber list countries, opening up most European holiday destinations and the US for leisure and business travel. Rules for travel to red list countries will remain the same, requiring returning UK travellers to quarantine for 10 days in a government-sanctioned hotel. The rules for travel are different in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Hello, this is Sue reading an article from the Island Echo. Weaver fish. Here's what to do if you get stung this summer. If you're lucky enough to not know what a weaver fish is, then it probably means you've also had the good fortune to not get stung by one while swimming at one of the island's many beaches. But just in case you ever do, here's a handy guide on how to stop the sting. So firstly, what are weaver fish? Weaver fish are colourful small creatures who enjoy spending their days in the warm water found in the shallow areas, just below the low tide mark. They nestle and hide themselves into the sand to hide from any potential predators and to give them an advantage when finding food. They can be found on many of the island's beaches. Unfortunately for us, though, hiding in the sand isn't the only defence mechanism weavers use to protect themselves. Weaver fish have a line of spines along their backs, which when stood on by an unsuspecting human frolicking in the waves can inject a nasty and extremely painful sting into the soft skin on our feet. The sting can be so painful that it can make even the toughest nut crack. Their sting can cause excruciating and radiating pain, along with nausea and headaches, itching and swelling. Weaver stings are some of the most common incidents that lifeguards and first aiders on beaches have to deal with. After reading the above, or perhaps experiencing it for yourself, you may be wondering how to best to avoid getting stung. Whilst there is no particular science to becoming a weaver victim, stings only usually happen when a weaver is trodden on directly. Some weaver experts recommend shuffling through the water to avoid accidentally putting your foot down on one of the feisty fish. Sea shoes are also available, such as wetsuit shoes / boots, Crocs and jelly shoes, which can all protect the soles of the feet and avoid any penetration from spines of a weaver. Getting stung by a weaver can be one of the most painful experiences. Yes, even more so than having your chips stolen by a seagull. It's important that you begin treating the sting as soon as possible to help stop the pain quickly. The NHS recommends that you ask a lifeguard or a first aider for help in the first instance. But should no one be available, you should do the following. Rinse the affected area with seawater, not fresh water. Remove any spines from the skin using tweezers, or if you don't have any with you, the edge of a bank card. Soak the area in the warmest water you can tolerate for at least 30 minutes, or use hot flannels or towels if you cannot soak it. Take over-the-counter painkillers such as paracetamol or ibuprofen. You should avoid using vinegar on the wound, weeing on the sting, yes, people have done this, applying ice or cold packs, touching spines with bare hands, covering or closing the wound. If you experience any of the following, you should dial 999 or go to the emergency department at St Mary's Hospital. Difficulty breathing, chest pains, fits or seizures, severe swelling around the affected area, severe bleeding, vomiting, lightheadedness or loss of consciousness.
This is Den reading an article from On the Wight. More staff taken on to ensure the Isle of Wight stays litter-free this summer. Bins are to be emptied more often and beaches cleaned daily as part of summer litter prevention campaign on the Isle of Wight. New measures to ensure the island is looking at its best over the peak summer holiday season have been announced by the Isle of Wight Council. Litter bins in tourist hotspots will be emptied more often and beaches cleaned daily as part of a summer litter prevention campaign unveiled on Monday. Extra staff are being recruited to keep parks, public open spaces and beaches clean and safe, while promoting local amenities and businesses and supporting a safer community and cleaner environment. Acting as eyes and ears on the ground, their duties will include reporting littering, fly tipping, graffiti, dog fouling and antisocial behaviour so that they can be tackled swiftly. With a staycation boom expected this summer, Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Lead for the Environment, said it was more important than ever that the island was looking its best. He said, as COVID-19 lockdown eases over the coming days, we want the island to bounce back as we reopen and welcome visitors back so our businesses that rely heavily on tourism can thrive and get the economy moving. We are determined to do everything we can to ensure our beaches and esplanades look inviting to our visitors and residents alike, while working proactively with our partners to coordinate and strengthen plans to keep everyone safe. The campaign has been made possible thanks to support from the government's Welcome Back Fund. Around £9,000 will be used to top up services provided by town and parish councils to ensure litter bins are emptied at least 3 times a day at Shanklin, Sandown and Ryde. Bins covered under the Highways PFI in Newport, Ryde, Cowes, Sandown, Shanklin and Ventnor will also be emptied more frequently. A further £6,600 will be used to introduce more daily beach cleans, with Ryde West, Lake, East Cowes, Springvale, Seaview and Freshwater being added to the list. One of the most significant measures, costing around £42,900, is the recruitment of 9 public realm assistants who will work alongside and support town and parish councils, businesses and communities. Working as part of the council's Environment Officer team, their duties will include monitoring litter bin emptying on beaches and esplanades with the ability to request additional collections, monitoring litter on beaches and arranging additional collections where necessary, working with environment staff to ensure enforcement of dogs on beaches orders and the new beach marker buoys, providing safety checks of all beach safety equipment, inspecting seafront toilets and reporting any issues. How to report. To report litter, overflowing bins, dog mess or fly tipping on council land, including beaches, email waste services on waste.contact@islewight.org.uk at iow.gov.uk or complete the form online. If the issue relates to litter on the highway verge or pavement, contact Island Roads via Fix My Street or call the hub on 01983 822 440. Councillor Bacon added, "This last year has been tremendously challenging for everyone, and we're pulling out all the stops to make 2021 the year of opportunity, with measures to support a safe and successful reopening of our seaside resorts this summer. We can all support our beautiful island and protect our unique biosphere environment by making sure litter goes into bins provided or is taken home when they are full."
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from Isle of Wight Radio, headlined "Alarming and Disrespectful. Isle of Wight Councillor slams school holiday decision." The former lead councillor for schools on the island has slammed the decision to scrap the 2-week October half-term without consulting parents as alarming and disrespectful. The decision was made following feedback from head teachers and island schools and their wish for a longer Christmas holiday. At last week's Cabinet meeting, the term dates for the 2022-23 school year were unanimously voted through, reverting the school calendar to a 1-week October half-term with a 2-week, 3-weekend Christmas holiday instead. 7 of the 10 head teacher responses felt the 2-week October holiday needed to be reviewed, so further consultation with schools was undertaken. The 2-week autumn half-term was introduced in the 2019-2020 school year, hoping to improve the attendance of pupils during the middle of the autumn term. However, it had been met with mixed reactions, with one school saying there was sparse evidence anything had changed. In the second consultation, 23 responses of 31 supported the extended Christmas break, with 14 of those wanting to return to the 1-week October holiday. The lack of parental consultation was raised as an issue by the Corporate Scrutiny Committee before the decision was made, but Councillor Debbie Andre, the Cabinet Member for Children's Education, said there was an expectation that schools would consult with parents and with schools. Now, the decision to not speak directly to parents has been challenged by Councillor Andre's predecessor, Councillor Paul Brading, who said he was very concerned it was thought right and proper by the new administration to make the important decision without talking to parents. He said, "The decision to follow Councillor Andre's belief and remove the 2-week October half-term in this way is alarming and disrespectful." Councillor Brading was in the post when the 2-week half-term was introduced and approved in 2017 after consultation received 1,877 responses, 1,790 from parents of children at school. Figures from the consultation show 926 respondents were in favour of shortening the summer holidays to establish a 2-week half-term break, against 632, with 943 people supporting the break in October as opposed to February. Councillor Brading said, following the implementation there had been many positive comments from schools and feedback from parents, and the main issue that seemed to be raised from the first consultation this year was the fact that head teachers were concerned about the shortening of the Christmas holidays. He said, "This decision shows a total lack of respect for the views of parents and the wider community. Ironically, I've received an email on another matter from Councillor Carl Love, Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care. He states the new administration is increasing community inclusion, participation and engagement. The way this decision has been made sadly shows they are doing exactly the opposite."
Isle of Wight libraries will return to normal opening hours. From Isle of Wight Radio, Iona. From tomorrow, Monday, Isle of Wight Council libraries will appear a bit like their old selves. Opening hours are going to be extended and there'll be no longer limits on the number of people who can be in the building at any one time. Other changes will see the return of comfortable seating in the adult and children's libraries. Study tables will be available and people will be able to read the day's newspapers. Computers will be available for free use and islanders can once again look forward to the start of library events and activities for groups, families and children later in the year. The council is reintroducing the 60p reservation charge on books from the 19th of July, but is extending the fines amnesty until the autumn. Revised opening hours of each library are as follows. Cowes Library, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, 10 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. and then 1:30 until 5 p.m. Saturday, 10 till 4:30. Freshwater Library, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. and then 1:30 until 4:30. Saturday, 9:30 in the morning until 12:30. Lord Louis Library, Newport, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Ryde Library, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, 9 a.m. until 5:30. Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. until 7. Saturday, 9 till 5. Sandown Library, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 until 12:30 and 1:30 until 5 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. until 12:30 and then 1:30 until 4:30. Ventnor Library, Tuesday and Friday, 9:30 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. and then 1:30 until 5 p.m. Wednesday, 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. Saturday, 9:30 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. and then 1:30 until 4:30.
Hello, this is Sue reading an article from On the Wight. Action will be taken against fly tippers, say Isle of Wight Council. The Cabinet member in charge says enough is enough and that action will be taken against fly tippers or those who litter. Enough is enough. That's the message from the Isle of Wight Council as plans for a no-nonsense approach to littering and fly tipping start to take shape. In the week, the authority unveiled a summer crackdown on littering. Decisive action has been promised to combat the growing problem of littering, which is blighting our towns, villages and countryside. Although fly tipping has not seen a significant increase in recent years, the council said any fly tip was one too many. Leading the charge for change is the Cabinet member for the Environment and Waste, Councillor Jonathan Bacon, who last week chaired the first meeting of a cross-party task and finish group formed to tackle the unsightly menace. He said the aim of the group was clear: to produce a full action plan to deliver meaningful improvement and a change in behaviours to reduce littering and tackle wider waste and fly tip issues, which concern so many island communities. Councillor Bacon said, "The island is a special and unique place, blessed with areas of outstanding and natural beauty. Granted UNESCO biosphere status and numerous sites of special scientific interest, conservation areas, historic towns and unique and protected wildlife. As we can see, the island is being polluted by a minority of individuals who do not have sufficient care for the island. The amount of littering and fly tips, including litter dropped from cars in the countryside, along our coastline, in our town centres and in our car parks, is simply unacceptable. Litter and fly tipping is environmental vandalism. It blights neighbourhoods and the countryside, is a threat to local wildlife and livestock, is a source of pollution and a danger to public health. We need a proactive and coordinated approach to ensure our island is kept clean, and wherever possible, those who litter and those who fly tip are identified and suitable action is taken against them. Over the coming months, the group of 11 councillors, supported by senior managers from the neighbourhoods team, will develop a rolling action plan to reduce fly tipping and littering through community engagement, education, innovation, and a review of enforcement. In the meantime, the council is taking steps to help ensure the island is looking at its best during the peak holiday season by launching a summer litter prevention campaign to highlight how we can all, in our own small way, help to keep our beautiful island tidy. Councillor Bacon added, "We've made our position clear on this matter. Enough is enough. We simply won't tolerate fly tipping and littering on the island, and our new task and finish group will be looking at how we can reduce instances of both. I see this as a positive step in restoring pride in the community and educating people to learn the rules. From the smaller issues of dropping litter to a bigger problem of fly tipping. Together, let's keep our beautiful island tidy. The Task and Finish group is due to bring forward a detailed report later in the year.
This is Den reading an article from On the Wight. Did you hear about the kitten who jumped off the Isle of Wight ferry and got rescued? The kitten decided to make a run for it and jumped overboard. But there was a happy ending, details within. Shortly after departure, evening sailing on the 19th of July, the 1700 Southampton to Isle of Wight crossing on the Red Eagle ferry halted its journey to launch a rescue mission to save a kitten which had escaped and jumped overboard from Deck C. Captain Simon Brindle stopped the vessel, allowing Ben Gibson, deckmate, and Mark Holland, deckhand, to deploy a rescue boat and successfully rescued him from the water, bringing him back safely on board. Leanna Lakes, Operations Director at Red Funnel, said, "We are incredibly proud of our captain and crew on the Red Eagle for our acting fast and saving one of our fluffy four-legged passengers, and thank them for their brave efforts yesterday. We are happy to say that the cat was safely returned and is doing well."
Good morning, everybody. This is the second part of the Talking News, read by Madeline and
Megan.
With the lifting of restrictions on Monday the 19th of July, Sight for Wight opened our doors to volunteers and members, and wow, what a week we've had. On Monday, we welcomed 42 of our marvellous volunteers back for coffee, cake and a lovely chat with new and familiar faces. The sun shone and we hope everyone had a lovely time. Our CEO thanked all our volunteers for the marvellous work they all do. On Wednesday, we held our first coffee and chat and welcomed 5 members again. We enjoyed our lovely garden and we caught up with news and answered members' queries. Coffee and Chat is on every Wednesday from 10 a.m. until 11:30, and it's only £1 to include the cake and the coffee.
Thursday Mix and Mingle started on Thursday with 11 members, and we were joined by the late Mel Barnes family to unveil the new bench in his memory. The room was full of laughter and everyone thoroughly enjoyed themselves. Thursday Mix and Mingle is held every week starting at 10:30 and finishing at 2 p.m. So if you would like to come along, call the office to book a space. A reminder that if you want to join us to the trip to Shanklin Theatre in November to watch Dad's Army, or you are interested in the planned holiday to Warner's next April, or the lunch club planned for the 10th of August at Millbrook House, please call the office to book a space by the end of July. Any queries, do not hesitate to call the office on 5220205, where staff will be able to answer any queries.
And we're now moving on to the letters to the editor. And this is called Listen to the Public on Ride Scheme from Ian Smith in Ride. I have read in various recent island publications some disturbing news of the decision to proceed with a major scheme at the existing interchange along Ryde Front, with what I consider to be complete disregard for Ryde residents, businesses, and the important mainland links to Portsmouth. As I understand it, many millions of pounds are available for upgrading the area at the foot of Union Street, encompassing the whole of the area from St Thomas's Street along to the bowling alley, and including the provision of traffic lights at the foot of George Street. The council has stated that it does not need planning or listed building permission for these works, and I would completely disagree with this statement. Planning legislation requires that any demolition within a conservation area requires consent. And furthermore, listed building consent is required for any works pertaining to a listed structure, which the pier and approaches are listed as Grade 2. I understand the proposal envisages the demolition of the cafe, which appears to have existed for well over 100 years. I understand that there exists under this cafe the remains of lighter docking used before the main pier existed. I believe this is of sufficient historic value to be listed on its own accord, and I would urge the appropriate authorities to proceed to have it listed without delay. The Council have stated consultation is open until early August, but they will proceed with the formal application on the 15th of this month without this having taken place. A proper consultation, given the extensive works envisaged, must be undertaken. I have very deep concerns at the ability of the Council to carry out the works. We have the debacle of the floating bridge, the empty ice rink building, the town hall unused for some 20 years, and a most unattractive major building in the town. The decades of neglect of St Thomas's Church only now being given proper consideration. It seems the Council can be tempted to throw all this away by the possibility of cash, which would be better targeted to other more appropriate projects. I can vividly recall the complete upset of the previous work, the constant holding of traffic and delay, the businesses affected who relied on the visitor spending on the island and were often left stranded. I can envisage these current proposals being even more damaging. Given the scope of roadworks and demolition set out, I could not conceive of a more inappropriate scheme. I believe this will set back the town for many years, particularly damaging when we are only now beginning to overcome the privations for the COVID outbreak.
And now here is a letter from someone who has supplied the name and address, but it's been withheld. And it's called Short-Term Thinking. I am outraged at the Council's decision to change the school term time dates for 2022-23 without any parental consultation. The decision to remove the 2-week break in October will impact many families, some of whom simply won't be able to afford an annual holiday. My family, like many others, has benefited from cheaper holidays in the October half-term break, and this year we will be spending 4 nights at Butlins for £313, which I believe is an affordable price for a family of 5. Out of interest, I looked up how much the exact same holiday would cost, same accommodation and length of stay, in the October half-term next year, and it is a staggering £1,388. While some may think this is still a cheap family holiday compared to travelling abroad, for example, I believe, and I'm sure many other parents would agree, that this is a lot of money for a 4-night stay in the UK, and we certainly won't be going again next year. I would urge the Council to reconsider their decision as soon as possible and consult with those most affected, the parents.
Czar did visit the Isle of Wight, from Nicky Buckle in Newport. After reading the column sent in about the Hoy Monument, D. McKinley in the County Press of the 16th of July, I felt compelled to write. In his letter he states there's no proof that the ill-fated Tsar Nicholas, Tsarina Alexandra and their children visited the island. This simply is not true. It is greatly documented and backed up with photographs and endearing stories of their visits. I'm sure the committee that had the monument raised in the royal family's memory would happily sit with Mr. McKinley and share some of the aforementioned pictures and stories. Indeed, you can simply Google and the information will come up. The Tsar and Tsarina were visitors to the island, where they visited Queen Victoria.
And now from Councillor Adrian Whittaker, Independent Councillor for Lake North and Shanklin Central. Shanklin. I have with interest looked at the announcements from Councillor Bacon about the investment in more staff to ensure the island stays litter-free this summer. The vast majority of proposals I welcome, but at what cost to the taxpayers once the Welcome Back Fund has been used? Ultimately, the Isle of Wight Council would need to budget for this to continue, or will it be another burden for town and parish councils? The proposal that concerns me is the inspecting of seafront toilets and reporting any issues. All seafront toilets, apart from the dilapidated toilets in Pier Street, Sandown, and the spa site in Shanklin, have all been handed to town and parish councils, and they maintain them, pay for cleaning and the maintenance. So what right have the Isle of Wight Council got to interfere in assets they have purchased onto town and parish councils to look after with no financial support? Many of these toilets also were liable for business rates until it was recently abolished, thanks to much lobbying by individuals to central government. Most of the public toilets were handed to councils in a terrible state of repair due to lack of investment by the Isle of Wight Council over a substantial amount of years. Now, with no consultation, they wish to inspect town and parish councils' assets, liabilities, with no financial contribution for their upkeep. Most local councils pay into the Environment Officer Scheme that covers the beach and toilets. I personally think this part of the Welcome Back Fund could have been spent on extra signage or refurbishing existing public realm areas.
The name of and address of the next letter was supplied but withheld. Track egotistic anti-vaxxers. I feel there should be a debate on how to address the minority of individuals who, for whatever reason it may be, do not wish to receive the COVID vaccine. After a year and a half of COVID rampaging through our care homes, nurseries, schools, and through our health system, one would have thought that the vaccine would have been music to everyone's ears, and that there would have been queues around the block to get this miracle drug out into our arms. However, unfortunately, that is not the case. Many people all over society mistrust the vaccine and deem it to be a greater risk to their health than the hugely mutated coronavirus. After a year of methodically researched scientific evidence, people are still outrightly objecting the idea of the jab. So, if physicians, epidemiologists, and loved ones cannot persuade them, then it is clearly time to let them have their way. However, how do we protect the community against further mutations, or at least try to contain the spread? In my honest opinion, the solution would be a PCR test conducted 3 times a week. Some will say that this is an infringement upon civil liberties, that this is just a nanny government. However, we have to look at it differently. For decades, patients were not taking their full course of antibiotics for somewhat mundane bacterial infections, and as a result we now find ourselves with deadly killers such as MRSA. My point being, due to the actions of a few people of following the scientific and medical advice, the majority now have to face the fear of these superbugs. The same principle applies to COVID, because as the more people that refuse to vaccinate, the more chances there are for this indiscriminate virus to mutate and become resistant to the drugs we have currently. By tracking people who are not vaccinated with frequency, monitoring their movements via routine calls from track and trace, we could ultimately limit the number of cases brought around by, frankly, egotism.
And now from the trustees of the Bembridge Harbour Trust, piece of correspondence, trustees acting rationally and cautiously over harbour action. If the management of the Bembridge Harbour are such very capable wardens, as Malcolm Thorpe asserts, County Press Letters 16/7/21, how is it that 1. The High Court has found the harbour in breach of its contractual obligation to take all reasonable steps to maintain the facilities in the harbour in reasonably good working order? 2. The leaders of the initiative to repair the vital Bembridge groin at the community's expense gave up in frustration over Mr. Thorpe's lack of cooperation over many years. 3. Dredging has been conducted at best sporadically and at nowhere near the rate necessary and permitted to keep the harbour clear. There is a huge job to do in the harbour, and Mr. and Mrs. Thorpe still have all the levers of control in their hands to start putting things right. It is time they devoted their efforts and the harbour substantial incomes accordingly. As for the trust, we can confirm that Bembridge Harbour Trust is able to cover its commitments, and trustees had already made personal contributions toward legal costs. Mr. Thorpe is quite correct in that we must act rationally and cautiously, and we do. As such, Bembridge Harbour Trust do indeed seek to limit their exposure to legal costs as the law permits, and any questions of conflicts of interest are of course formally addressed. We find Mr. Thorpe's unfounded concern about trustees' personal contributions somewhat ironic. As regards the groin repair, we note he says it is critical to the harbour's sustainability, but has not offered any personal contribution. Not only that, he seems to ask the community to pay for it twice, once in the form of harbour dues and mooring fees. This is the sort of thing they're intended for, after all, and again via community fundraising.
And again, the name and address for this letter was supplied but withheld. And it's thanks to all. I would like to thank the people and kind nurse who assisted me in the road accident when I was knocked down on the crossing on Lake High Street on June the 21st.
And a short one here, entitled Overgrown Curbs, the Worst I Have Seen, from Janet Appel, Cowes. I have lived up our road in Cowes for more than 25 years and have never seen the curbside so bad with weeds. There is one that is almost 3 foot tall. I have emailed the council complaining about the long grass and curbs a few weeks ago, and they have cut our grass, but the weeds are getting bigger and bigger. What do they do with all our council tax that increases year by year? Our services are getting worse. And one more little one called Looking for Linda, from Diana Blackmer from Virginia. Oh, right. I belong to a wonderful computer group of horsewomen. We have been pen pals for almost 20 years and have members from the US, England, Wales and Australia. Our group is the Antique Manure Movers International, AMMI. We have lost contact with one of our most favourite members, Linda Andrews. She used to live in Dorset, but moved to the Isle of Wight several years ago. Her last address was in Ventnor. Can you help us find her, or find out if she is okay?
And we have some Wight memories now. A new book is Swan Song to Island Steam Days. A swan song to the Island Steam Railways comes in a book due to be launched at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway on Sunday. There have been more than 100 books covering different aspects of the island's railway past, published since the lines to Ventnor and Cowes closed in 1966. A new book, The Times They Are A-Changin', borrows its title from Bob Dylan, 1965 single, which would have been spinning on many an angst-ridden island teenager's turntable across the mid-60s era that the book covers. It is the idea of ex-islander Derek Gaughan, who with his childhood chum Phil Hayward, who both grew up in Ryde, spent countless hours riding on the island steam trains. Derek had been encouraged by a local historian to keep notes of all his observations, and they happily still survive today, forming the nucleus of the book, coupled with his still vivid memories of those far-off happy times. At the same time, a mainland student, Nick Halewood, unknown to Derek, was spending working summer holidays with his grandparents in Newport. A keen photographer, he took around 500 images during the final years of the island's steam trains. Cash restraints meant nearly all of them were only ever developed into negative strips, not even printed. In 1973, Nick emigrated to Japan, where he remains to this day. The old negatives were put in a drawer and largely forgotten about, until he scanned a few as trial posts on a railway interest social media page earlier in 2019. There they were seen by Derek, who immediately made contact, and the idea of a joint book was hatched. Derek says the book is aimed not only at railway enthusiasts, but those with an interest in 1960s social history, especially all things Isle of Wight. The book is limited to a run of just 500 copies. A book signing session is being held on Sunday, with the book available to purchase from the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, either from their gift shop at Haven Street or through its online shop.
And now another memory about the Nab Tower. It's visible to the east of the island, this tower, and it was planned for anti-submarine protection in the Solent in the First World War. It was sunk over the Nab rocks to replace the lightship after the war, and it marks the deep water eastern entry into the Solent. During the First World War, the British Admiralty designed 8 towers, codenamed M-N, which were to be built and positioned in the Straits of Dover to protect Allied merchant shipping from German U-boats. Designed by civilian Guy Maunsell, the towers were to be linked together with steel nets and armed with 2 4-inch guns, with the idea of closing the English Channel to enemy ships. However, by the end of the war, only 1 tower had been completed. In 1920, the completed Nab Tower was towed by 2 paddle-wheel tugs to the Nab Rock. Buoyancy was provided by the honeycomb construction of the concrete base, which created 18 watertight compartments. When these were flooded, the structure sank and settled to rest at an angle of 3 degrees from vertical towards the northeast, a characteristic tilt which is obvious to this day. The Nab Tower was manned as a lighthouse, but also functioned as a Royal Navy signal station. And during the Second World War, it was equipped with a pair of Bofors guns to provide some defence to the Solent approach, and actually shot down several aircraft. The Royal Navy withdrew its personnel from the tower sometime after the war, but the tower remained under the Ministry of Defence ownership until 1984, when Trinity House acquired the freehold. The Nab Tower still functions as a lighthouse, but since 1983 it has been unmanned. In November 1999, the merchant freighter Dole America hit the Nab. The ship was badly damaged and only avoided sinking by being run aground. The base of the tower suffered superficial and internal damage, which was repaired in 2001. In 2013, Trinity House commissioned BAM Nuttall to undertake a major refurbishment programme due to extensive corrosion of the upper levels, which meant it was unsafe to land helicopters on the helipad. The height of the tower was reduced from 27 metres to 17. All external steel and cladding were removed, and the existing concrete substructure was coated in a new layer of concrete. On completion, new beacons were fitted, along with a fixed main LED light and identical standby light, with 12 nautical mile range and a new fog system. All are solar panelled. And did you know that the NAB Tower was featured as the main setting of the 1951 Hammer thriller, The Dark Light?
And now we're remembering legendary island band Kite. In the hot summer of 1976, the new lineup of local group Brother brought out the crowds to Keats Inn in Shanklin, and both locals and visitors flocked to see this band, who quickly gained the reputation of being rather special. Some nights the clifftop venue was filled to capacity. They could play anything from Country Roads to Midnight Cowboy via Heart on My Sleeve. They even had a unique voice box to play the latest Peter Frampton hit. Their three extremely talented musicians were Shanklin's Andy Skelton, who played guitar and sang lead vocals and had just returned from 3 years with an army band. Popular Seaview drummer and vocalist Doug Watson, formerly of bands like Knights and Midnight Creepers, and Rookley bassman Tim Marshall from the Silver Band and cruise ship groups. I gave them their first write-up in July 1977 and never expected just 6 months later they would create one of the greatest scoops of my near 50-year career as a showbiz writer. I'd had a Christmas card from the group when they were playing at the Virgin Cave Club, Copenhagen. Then they were storming audiences in famous London pubs like the Green Man and the Swan in the Old Kent Road. Suddenly, out of the blue, came the message they were all set to appear live on one of Britain's top television shows, New Faces. They wanted me to have the scoop, and I managed to go public just the day before their appearance. February the 5th, 1977, was the day Brother was seen by millions on New Faces. With the whole island watching, they came on in their dazzling new outfits to sing Andy's song, You've Got the Power, a modern number with a real funky feel. They pleased the panel of Mickey Most, Lionel Blair, Alan Freeman and Shaw Taylor. They were joint winners and were given some positive advice by legendary record producer Most. He told them to change their name, as there was a group currently in the pop charts called the Brothers. By the time they were on the All Winners show the following Saturday, they had changed their name to Kite. Kite impressed the judges, George Elric, Muriel Young, Jeff Love and Jack Parnell, with another Andy Skelton song called I Love the Love We've Got. They won the show and a place in the gala final. The band had been spotted in the London pubs even before their New Faces debut and had secured a record deal with Decca. A single was released to tie in with the appearance in the gala final. Even reaching the final was a superb achievement, and they suddenly found themselves up against some top acts, including the superb Coffee and Cream duo, who went on to win the show. In that winning vocal duo with Lance Ellington, the son of the famous band leader Ray Ellington, Lance went on to make records and still sings regularly on Strictly Come Dancing. Kite came fourth and were only 31 marks behind the winners. They became the top group of the whole 1977 New Faces series. It seemed they were on the threshold of really making a name in the music world. The band were in demand and tours were arranged both home and abroad. They had a record deal with a major company, but for many people it was a lack of good management that really prevented them from success their talents deserved. They cut some quite superb records and had an album released. One or two of Andy's clever songs were recorded by artists like Tina Charles.
On the very last interview I ever did with Dougie Watson, I asked him if he was disappointed they hadn't become household names. "Oh, when you've been doing it for a long time, you take each thing as it comes along," said Dougie. I felt at that time we stood as much of a chance of having success as any group of our standard. So many things needed to be in place: the right producer, the right management, and the right record company behind you. I think we gave it our best shot and took it as far as we could. We enjoyed it, had fun, and moved on to other things. Pop music is such a fickle business, and Kite were lucky with the fact that all three were really gifted professional musicians who could all easily make careers out of playing music, which they all did. Their very last island gig, until a much later one-off comeback night, was Sunday, September the 2nd, 1979 at Keats Inn. Another full house, of course. Andy has taught music for many years and is now mainland-based. While still on the island, he sang with two other legendary local bands, The Choir and Pump House Gang. He has returned in recent years for appearances with the island band New Moon. His songs have been recorded by other artists, and at one stage he was in 5 different bands, including Fabba, one of the first ABBA tribute bands. He also made records with Virgin Records group Louis Louis. Tim, who loves his real ales, continued playing on cruise liners for nearly 30 years. He's also been in several local bands and stayed with the Johnny Wiltshire Show Band in Sandown Pavilion to back summer season stars like Jimmy Tarbuck and Matt Monroe. When lockdown permits, he still plays at Shanklin Theatre and the King's, Southsea. He's also just written a small book of walks from the Chequers Inn, Rookley. Sadly, Doug died earlier this year. He was the band leader at Warner's Bembridge Coast for many years, and they won the Best Band title on Warner's national circuit. He was also such an integral part of both Blue Moon and New Moon. He also always encouraged youngsters just starting out. Luckily, Kite's music lives on. They have CDs available of their studio recordings and live gigs at Keats Inn.
And this is some information about a dance event that's being held in aid of Mountbatten. Ballet Works has thought outside the box to bring a charity event to the island this year, despite recent restrictions. Island-based Ballet Works has successfully collaborated with dancers and artists from some of the world's leading dance companies, and is this year offering a unique opportunity for people to enjoy things dance while raising vital funds for Mountbatten. In August, Ballet Works will be hosting an evening of entertainment, but instead of the usual live show, audiences can enjoy seeing the dancers in action via film. The evening will involve artists of various dance disciplines from all over the world, performing works through specially pre-recorded dance films. Creative director Robert Robinson said, "Over the years, Ballet Works has supported Mountbatten, raising over £20,000. Despite the pandemic, we wanted to continue to play our part by raising as much money for Mountbatten as possible, to ensure it can continue to provide care for their patients and staff. As it was still unclear when we will be able to organise live performances again, it was time we thought outside of the box. For many, this is a troubling time, and for us, it's important we raise money for Mountbatten and support our local community on the Isle of Wight. To book a ticket for the online evening of dance at 7 p.m. on Friday, August the 6th, visit www.balletworks.com.
Right, just before we go on to other what's on, there's just Jonathan Young's column, where the title of which is "Freedom Snatched Away from Those Most in Need." That's it then. It's over. COVID. Officially downgraded. Just a little flu. Bolsonaro. Trump. You were right all along. Matt Hancock's one rule for all approach to his job meant he had to go, but his political assassination was celebrated and possibly engineered chiefly by those who recognised him as one of the few bullocks against full capitulation to COVID in the name of the economy and freedom. And so now, with Hancock gone and Michael Gove in hiding for unexplained reasons, the headbangers are firmly back in charge, just as they were with Brexit, and for the same reason, which is that we have a Prime Minister scared stiff for his career prospects should he dream of seeking parliamentary consensus on anything. Theresa May made that mistake. Look what happened to her. Johnson's not going down that road. Science abandoned. We've to learn to live with COVID. Let me unpack that mantra. It's a euphemism meaning learn to risk dying from COVID, or get used to the idea of someone close to you dying of it, alone and frightened. Fronting the operation is bus driver's son, Sajid Javid, himself now in self-isolation with the virus. The families of more than 50 COVID victim London bus drivers must want to ask him exactly why it's now left to their mayor to stop precautions taken too late in the early months of the pandemic, now being snatched away once more with cases rising steeply. Javid, apparently thinking he was doubling up on his old job as Chancellor, announced, "My task is to help return the economic and cultural life that makes this country so great, while, of course, protecting life and our NHS." Why is this important for the island? Because the many things we have going for us here don't include miraculous protection from the lunacy of our rulers. Island exceptionalism doesn't work in the face of a pandemic any more than British exceptionalism, nor any more than banging on about Blitz. It didn't work in January, up from 0 cases on December the 13th to 394 on January the 4th, and it's not working now. Like everywhere else, the clinically vulnerable are being forced into indefinite self-isolation if they want to stay alive. Retail and hospitality workers are expected to police responsible behaviour after the government walked off the job. Boris Johnson's Freedom Day has come and gone, with zero recognition on the part of its champions of the difference between freedom to and freedom from, a concept with which the right has always struggled. Relaxation of the mask mandate, for example, presents selfish people with the freedom to make other people sick, without even the pretense of economic benefit. It's as simple and as immoral as that. The island's geographic insularity delayed the start of the present wave, just as it did last autumn. High vaccination rates and a low proportion of school-aged children may blunt it somewhat, but St Mary's will nonetheless fill up, while the refrigerated shipping containers in the crematorium grounds may, God forbid, yet find a use. So COVID's coming home again, but episodes of medical negligence can and should lead to consequences for those responsible, and it's the chickens of callous, self-interested mismanagement which ought also to be coming home to roost.
And now we have some more items of news. And this is about a very adventurous cat. Cat overboard story has perfect ending. Red Funnel crew members launched a rescue mission on Monday afternoon after a kitten jumped overboard. Shortly following departure, the 5 p.m. Southampton to East Cowes crossing on Red Eagle was halted. Crew members quickly launched a rescue boat to save a feline which had escaped and jumped overboard from Deck C. Captain Simon Brindle stopped the vessel, allowing deckmate Ben Gibson and deckhand Mark Holland to intervene. They successfully rescued the male kitten from the water and brought him safely back on board. Leanna Lakes, Operations Director at Red Funnel, said, "We are incredibly proud of our captain and crew on the Red Eagle for acting fast and saving one of our fluffy, four-legged passengers, and thank them for their brave efforts yesterday. We are happy to say that the cat was safely returned and is doing well."
And now back to entertainments happening. Apollo launch new plays. The popular Apollo Theatre is back after lockdown with not one but 3 plays by John Mortimer, probably best known for Rumpole of the Bailey under the umbrella title A London Affair. In Knightsbridge, a TV executive gets the wrong idea about his prospective mother-in-law's profession. Or does he? In Lunch Hour, the repeated interruptions of a hotel manageress thwart a couple's attempt to begin an affair, while in Marble Arch, an ageing actress tries to move an inconvenient body. Can Harrods help? Maybe not. The Apollo Theatre's A London Affair will be staged from July the 30th to August the 7th, not on the Sunday or Monday, at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available by phoning the box office on 210010. The Apollo is also hosting After All These Years today, that's Friday, and tomorrow, Saturday, prior to its Ventnor Fringe run.
Love letters led to a very long marriage. The determination of Gladys and Alec Penston to get married against the odds, even drafting in the Archbishop of Canterbury to help, should have been an early sign they were in it for the long haul. On Wednesday they celebrated 76 years of wedded bliss. "We are very lucky to have lived as long as we have, and together," says Gladys, aged 94. Alec, 96, is a war veteran who survived D-Day, 10 Arctic convoys, the London Blitz, and a long posting in the Far East. Just 2 days after their wedding in 1945, he was sent to Japan and didn't see his new bride for 14 months. The couple met when Gladys's sister was courting Alec's cousin. They wrote love letters to each other before getting engaged, and then wanted to get married while sailor Alec was briefly on leave, but there wasn't enough time to read the banns and get the paperwork done. Undeterred, they sought a special marriage licence from the Archbishop of Canterbury, to allow them to marry at short notice. It was 17 years before they were blessed with a child, Jacqueline, and they are now proud grandparents to Katie and Ian, and great-grandparents to Alice, Emily and Eric. The couple live in Shanklin after moving to the island in 2008. They have a couple of meals out planned and a trip to the theatre. Gladys, who's a former acrobatic dancer, loves the stage, so seeing a show is one of her favourite pastimes.
And for anyone interested in swimming, we have a report on the Solent Swim. So the annual Solent Swim was a resounding success at the weekend, raising more than £30,000. Organised by West Wight Sports and Community Centre, swimmers cross 1.2 miles from Hurst Castle near Lymington to Colwell Bay. The challenge had been expected to take place on July the 4th, but was postponed on account of the weather. On Sunday, July the 18th, 56 swimmers met at Yarmouth Harbour in the morning and were ferried across to Hurst Castle aboard Yarmouth Rose. At 4:45 a.m. they departed on their swim across the Solent to to Colwell Bay, accompanied by 33 kayakers, a small flotilla of powered boats and 2 freshwater lifeboats. This year was the 11th annual swim, and among the swimmers were the oldest and youngest ever participants. Veteran and accomplished swimmer Jenny Ball, aged 83, and 17-year-old Lucy Isaacson. Swimmers raised funds for the community centre, a registered charity providing community support, health and physical activities. In 2020, the centre also led the local response to the pandemic and formed the West Wight Hub, coordinating hundreds of volunteers across the West Wight. Swimmers were invited to also raise funds for charities of their choice, and this year looks set to be the biggest ever, with more than 30,000 raised. The cash will support the charity to continue providing services to the community and get activities back up and running again after post-pandemic. Organisers have thanked the many individuals who helped to make the swim possible, from the kayakers and boat skippers to the lifeboat and beach crews. They also thank the Island FX, who generously sponsored hot dogs for all at the end, and most of all the swimmers and their sponsors. This year's swim was rearranged after strong winds 2 weeks ago made it unsafe, said Claire Griffin for the centre, but it turned out to be possibly the best ever, with absolute ideal calm conditions and swimmers starting as the sun rose on Sunday morning. As always, it was a tremendous community effort, and we are very grateful to all the volunteer teams for keeping everyone safe, and to Needles Pleasure Cruises for transporting swimmers to Hurst.
Bank announces changes for clients. Barclays Bank insists it will continue to support businesses on the island, even as it introduces a new relationship management model. Customers had contacted the county press concerned about a downgrading of services. The bank says its new approach will make it easier for corporate customers. 2 dedicated local business banking managers will continue to be based on the island, but their role will be to support more established businesses with their growth plans. Barclays says for even larger clients with more complex needs and larger lending requirements, a mainland-based regional director can travel as required. Meanwhile, smaller businesses and start-ups will use online and telephone services. Barclays Business Direct is also for smaller firms that trade abroad or need loans. Barclays has 2 Isle of Wight branches at Newport and Ryde, one of which Isle of Wight startups must visit for identity and verification checks. One business customer told the county press that he feared access to a representative would be more difficult after the changes. A Barclays spokesperson said, "Barclays continues to work hard to support our business customers across the UK, including those on the Isle of Wight, as we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis."
And now, what does COVID Freedom Day mean on the Isle of Wight? After Freedom Day on Monday, the Isle of Wight is getting used to the relaxation of rules. But it has not been all plain sailing, as case rates have continued to rise and schools have been sending year groups home to isolate. On Wednesday alone, Public Health England figures showed 75 new Isle of Wight cases. The island's rolling rate per 100,000 people in the 7 days up to July the 16th was 224.3, around half of the national rate. And the Isle of Wight NHS Trust confirmed that there was 1 person with COVID in its intensive care unit, while an unspecified number were on other COVID wards. On the Isle of Wight, health leaders are urging us to act responsibly. Simon Bryant, Director of Public Health, said, "The pandemic is not over, and the disease carries risks for all of us, but particularly the most vulnerable members of our island community. We know getting vaccinated helps protect ourselves and others. reduced transmission of the virus, minimises the development of new variants. My 2 key messages are: please take a cautious approach and get vaccinated. Public transport operators are urging us to continue wearing masks. And about the buses, temporary bus stops in Newport Town Centre, which help make space for social distancing, will be removed. Stops for routes 5, 7, 12 and 38 have moved back into the bus station. And the ferries? All the Isle of Wight ferry operators have announced that masks are still required on crossings. Wight Link has confirmed the measures will continue for anyone who is not exempt, and social distancing will also continue. Hover travel passengers will still be required to wear masks. Red Funnel 2 is asking passengers to wear a face covering on its ferries and in its terminals. The only exceptions are if a passenger is exempt, under 11 years of age, on outside decks or when eating, drinking. Taxis. Newport South Street taxi rank reinstated. Parking. The short stay car park at Church Lytton, adjacent to Newport bus station, will reopen. Libraries. Masks will still be required, but opening hours are being extended and there are no limits on the number of people who can be inside. Comfortable seating returns, study tables can be used and daily newspapers are available. Computers can be used for free. There are plans for library events and activities. The Isle of Wight Council is reintroducing the 60p reservation charge on books, but is extending the fines amnesty until the autumn. West Wight Leisure Centre. The Sports and Leisure Centre in Freshwater is urging islanders to continue to be vigilant. NHS, St Mary's Hospital and other healthcare locations. Strict safety measures will remain at the St Mary's Hospital even after today. Patients and visitors will be required to wear face coverings and to socially distance. Strict infection controls will be followed to protect vulnerable people and staff. Visiting restrictions remain, and patients should attend appointments alone where possible.
Home's proposal for village reduced in size. A proposed freshwater development has been reduced in size after objectors feared the destructive effect it could have on their quiet cul-de-sac. Revised plans have been submitted to the Isle of Wight Council by Tallulah Estates, cutting the units outlined for Birch Close on formerly agricultural land from 50 dwellings to 44. Nearly 50 objections against the greenfield development have been posted, including from the island's MP Bob Seeley, the local branch of the Campaign for Protection of Rural England, and Totland and Colwell Councillor Chris Jarman before he was elected. Freshwater Parish Council were among objectors and said it would be a major overdevelopment of the land. With other big projects approved and some being built in the area already, the traffic increase the proposed housing would bring was also thought to be excessive. Birch Close residents had expressed concerns about the visual intrusion and infringement to their privacy should the application be approved, as 6 windows of one of the 2-storey blocks of flats would directly look into their gardens. Under new plans, that block of flat has been removed and other properties along the boundary revised into chalet bungalows. Previously, plans were for 38 houses and 12 flats in a mix of 32 market and 18 affordable properties.
And the 2021 Cows Week focus on yachting events. Cows Week is going back to its roots this year with a focus on events on the water. Although there will not be a fireworks display or a visit from aerial display team the Red Arrows, visitors to the historic regatta are promised plenty of shoreside sailing action, There are already 5,000 entries, with more coming in. Regatta Director Lawrence Mead told the county press, "We'll have lots of spectator action. We've moved the start line back to the Royal Yacht Squadron Castle." He said this was ideal for watching racing from the green. Competing classes will set off every 5 minutes between 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. every day. There will be things to enjoy on shore too, although attractions this year will be smaller and quieter than in recent years. A daytime village will be set up on Cowes Parade. The car park there closes on Monday for a fortnight to make space for stalls and spectators. There are stages too, with mainly acoustic music in Cowes Yacht Haven and host of Isle of Wight bands on the parade. Entertainment starts on Friday, July the 30th, with an opening night party courtesy of 3010. Derek Sandy, Beth Berry, Lucid and JC Grimshaw will be among the familiar names taking a turn. Blonde Bombshell perform on Cowes Parade to close the week on Friday, August the 6th.
Island backing city's bid. The Isle of Wight Council will support Southampton in its bid to become the UK City of Culture 2025. Described as an opportunity not to be missed, the Isle of Wight will now act as a supporting regional partner, providing political, practical and financial aid for the bid linked to the island's key transport, tourism and maritime associations with the city. Councillor Julie Jones-Evans, Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Business Development, said cultural regeneration is a key cornerstone of the regeneration strategy, which will give the island a sense of identity, pride and belonging. Speaking at the Council's Cabinet meeting last week, Councillor Jones-Evans said it was exciting for the island to be part of the bid, and it will, much like Coventry with its successful culture bid, see lots of investment and job creation. She said, regeneration is not just about building things and creating jobs. It is about bringing the whole of our community up. The bid from Southampton was being sent to government on Monday, with a decision made in September as to whether it is shortlisted. The final winner will be announced next May. The council will make a £10,000 contribution from a regeneration budget. A further £50,000 could be spent on supporting projects on the Isle of Wight over the next 5 years. It is hoped by supporting Southampton's bid, the island will benefit from an increased number of visitors, enhanced profile as a cultural destination and more funding. The success of Hull as the UK's City of Culture in 2017 was said to grow the value of tourism in the city to £300 million, with over 6 million visits to the city and more than 800 jobs created. The council says the island would be a significant partner to Southampton because of its cultural heritage, with landmark events such as the Isle of Wight Festival and Cows Week and the UNESCO Biosphere designation. Councillor Jones-Evans said the bid director was overwhelmed with what the Isle of Wight could bring to the bid.
And now, to finish, the In Touch programme. Plans to require voters to show photo ID at polling stations were recently introduced in Parliament under the Elections Bill. But the RNIB are concerned that this will make the electoral process even less accessible for blind and partially sighted voters who are seemingly disproportionately less likely to hold a passport or driving licence. We talk to the RNIB's Director of Development, Keith Valentine, about the charity's concerns surrounding this. As we get some answers from Network Rail's Head of Public and Passenger Safety, Alan Spence, about their plans for tactile paving across their network, there have been some promising signs emerging from Network Rail over the last 12 months, as they have installed tactile on a significant number of platform edges. However, their current plans to equip all stations by 2029 has been dubbed by charities as not being quick enough. We're asking whether this installation could be sped up, what funds are available for said installation, and whether any temporary safety measures are being put in place while these plans are being carried out. There is no scaffolding news this week.
Please excuse the occasional traffic noise, as during this very hot spell we have the studio windows open. So that's all we have for this week, and it's goodbye from Madeline.
And from Megan.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. One step forward, two steps back. Tonight we look at fears that just as the campaign to give visually impaired people equal rights to vote secretly and independently seemed to be bearing fruit, there's another possible legislative spanner in the works. And we'll be hearing from Network Rail's Head of Public and Passenger Safety. Is it really going to take another 8 years before all station platforms in the UK have tactile paving to make them safe? But first, earlier this year, we reported on an experiment during council elections where visually impaired voters at 9 polling stations in Norfolk could use audio equipment at their polling stations to identify candidates and where those candidates appeared on the voting paper. This would allow them to cast their vote without assistance and in secret, something which hadn't really been possible before. It followed a groundbreaking judicial review in which a High Court judge said that the previous method of voting was unfit for purpose. One of the voters taking part in the experiment, Joy Croft, told In Touch what she thought of being able to use audio.
It went pretty well. It's not bad for an electronic voice. And what's good about it is that I'm in charge of playing it. I could play it as many times over as I wanted to. The thing that was better was that the steward wasn't standing over me reading the names, which meant I was more private, which is what I want, of course, like any voter. But also, I didn't have the embarrassment of having to ask him to read over and over again. I just did it myself. I was born in the United States, and I've only been voting here since 2000. So this was very much the most kind of independent way that I've been able to vote so far.
Joy Croft. Well, the RNIB, which organised the trial, now wants to see that equipment made available in all polling stations throughout the UK. But their satisfaction with that has been rather tarnished by the government's plans to introduce a requirement for photo ID at polling stations under the current elections bill. The government view is that by asking voters to prove that they are who they say they are, it'll guard against potential voter fraud in future elections. Well, the RNIB fears that this will exclude around 40,000 blind and partially sighted voters who'll find it difficult to provide photo ID. And their Director of Development, Keith Valentine, joins me now. Keith, just explain exactly what your concerns are about asking visually impaired people to provide voter ID.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I mean, 2022 is the 150th year of the right to vote in secret for citizens in the UK. And the root of what we're saying here in terms of access at voting and voter ID is that citizens that are visually impaired need to be able to exercise their right. We think it's foundational. We think it's part of the process of being included fundamentally in society and participating in communities, and that's about giving back as well as receiving support. We've obviously had some delays in the adoption of the equipment that Joy was speaking about there, partly relating to the pandemic, and our real push now is to make sure that that's adopted. And in regard to the ID, it's simply the case that those 40,000 people, and I suggest it's more widely as well, won't necessarily have the kind of photo ID that would be out there in the general population. The obvious one to point to, Peter, is the driving licence as a definite indication of who you are. So our concerns here are about disincentives to vote at all. being created, as well as the difficulties in voting themselves.
But aren't there other ways to acquire photo ID?
Yeah, there's always going to be workarounds, and people will do that. But on the whole, within the population, photo IDs are much lower level than it is in the general population. So the point we would make to government here is there is a definite need to consider, the way that blind and visually impaired people live their lives. At root, the point here is that the legislation needs not to be blind to the needs of those people as they participate in society, something as fundamental as an election.
Now, you've been talking to MPs about this. I think you had a number of online sessions with them. What kind of things are they telling you? Are you making headway with this point?
So the argument, and we had people with us from parties across the board in government, I think the basic argument about the right of people to be able to vote in the same way as anyone else is definitely landing. And I think that we had a number of MPs that were recounting examples from their constituencies of people they know that have had difficulty in voting or voting in secret within their constituencies. So I get a sense that the case is well made and understood, that there's a sense from the MPs that we've spoken to see this picked up. The real job here, though, Peter, I think is, to build from that, to get an active and positive conversation with government, particularly about how they're going to implement the equipment that's going to make it possible for everybody to vote, as is their right, come the next elections.
Now, this isn't your only worry, I think. You're concerned about the inaccessibility of relevant information surrounding elections, manifestos, more local candidate information, that kind of thing.
I mean, it links to a fundamental point that we'll be making, or we have been making, and we'll be making over the next year, that a right to accessible information isn't simply about large print or a bit of braille here and there. It's about participation and the ability of people to properly, understand and engage with the dynamics of what's going on politically in their communities. And in many instances, the requirement on public authorities to publish accessible information, in law, it's legislated. And I think too often our campaigns guys are out there trying to get bodies to subscribe to what the law sets out that should be followed. I think as well there's a job for all of us to do to raise the profile of the significance of this, that these are issues that where they got wrong actually act as a barrier to inclusion. They become an exclusion. And I think simply if local authorities and those administering elections, and I'd suggest with conversations with political parties as well, can have in mind that there are large proportions of the population affected by sight loss that could be their supporters, that could be active citizens, I'm sure they'll see the value of just adhering to accessible information as a matter of right.
There was a time when the RNIB itself, provided quite a lot of this information almost automatically. I mean, the major manifestos, for example. Couldn't they do more of that now? Don't you need to be a leader instead of asking other people to do it?
100% we need to lead in our field. I don't think the RNIB is ever going to be an alternative to mainstream organisations adhering to their statutory responsibilities and basically following the law in terms of the information that they report. But we put as much effort as we possibly can into mitigating those processes. And you'll know, certainly in terms of newspapers and our establishment providing audiobooks and all of the various other things, we're doing a hell of a lot to get information to people. But we recognise that there's only so much you can do from a charitable perspective. Bear in mind, we have a pact, if you like, with the public that give us their money to pursue this stuff. And I think in this area, we are wise to make the point to government, to legislators, local authorities, and I'd extend that to companies and political parties to do their bit to make the system work for blind and visually impaired people who shouldn't need a charity to intervene so that they can exercise their rights like every other person. That should be the way that the country works. And I'd argue as well that doesn't just benefit blind and visually impaired people, that creates the kind of community where we're all operating equally and can participate, and that can only be good for everybody.
In a statement from the Cabinet Office, they told us this government will continue to work with charities and the electoral sector to ensure support for voters is available in more accessible formats, improve training for electoral staff on disability awareness, and expand support for people with a wide range of disabilities at polling stations through the Elections Bill. So they're sounding positive. Are we nearer to people with a visual impairment having the same voting rights as anyone else?
I think we are nearer. Whether we're an inch forward or a mile forward, I think we'll find over this next 6 months to a year as we start to look at how these devices are implemented and the various other policy areas that relate to that. What we're certainly not getting pushback from government, and the Minister gave us words to share with MPs at the meetings last week, but we see this as something that we aren't going to step back on. We think it's a foundational issue for the inclusion of blind and visually impaired people in society, and absolutely applaud the government taking that position and making that commitment. We obviously are keen to see what that means in detail, and then it solves the material problems that blind and visually impaired people face in putting their tick or their cross in that box and voting for the person that they believe to be the right person to be elected.
Keith Valentine, thank you very much indeed. And now for some of your emails, and as usual, full of observation, humour and some interesting suggestions. Like this advice from David Austin to the people who collect our rubbish in response to our recent item about the menace of wheelie bins scattered all over our pavements.
We could reduce the length of time bins are out awaiting collection by instructing councils to push back the time of collections to beyond 9 a.m, that is after peak travelling times, and asking households where possible to put out their bins after 6 a.m. This would mean no bins or few bins, at least overnight, wouldn't it? Similar arrangements can be made for commercial waste, with even the streets of our capital city perpetually littered with junk 24 hours a day. Why can't we have direct collection from premises during the day when businesses are open?
And our item on bringing up baby when you're visually impaired drew this delightful but sadly anonymous anecdote.
I always change both my daughters on the changing mat on the floor, so I wouldn't drop the baby. One day, after changing my eldest daughter, I left her safely on the changing mat while I went to clear the soiled nappy and other items away. When I returned, I found to my horror that she wasn't on her changing mat. I crawled around on all fours, but I wasn't able to find her. I knew that she was unable to walk, so she couldn't be far. My husband returned home from work to find me crying. He asked me what the matter was. I replied, "I've lost the baby." He took a look around the lounge and to his delight found the small baby underneath the sofa. He asked her what she was doing under there. She smiled and chuckled back at him. She'd discovered the art of crawling.
Baby's revenge. Sweet. We always like your emails, serious or more light-hearted. You can email intouch@bbc.co.uk. And now to another subject that has created a good deal of listener interest. Last week we returned to the issue of installing tactile paving to the edges of all station platforms to warn visually impaired people they were approaching the edge. Concern about this have been heightened by the death of a passenger last year at a station in southeast London. But the stated target of completing this work by 2029 didn't seem fast enough to many people. However, in a statement to us last week, Network Rail said an additional £10 million had been agreed with the Department for Transport, which would mean additional work could start straight away to be completed as soon as possible. Well, it's a figure we still haven't had confirmed to us by the Department for Transport, so clarification of exactly what was happening still seemed necessary. So I'm delighted to welcome Network Rail's Head of Public and Passenger Safety, Alan Spence. Alan, first of all, just what can you tell us about how quickly this work can be completed?
Hello. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to give you some further information on this. Clearly, after the awful circumstances of Cleveland Gervais dying at Eden Park Station in 2020, there's been a huge amount of focus on how we can accelerate fitting of tactile surfaces on the edges of station platforms. We've got a programme in place in the majority of the network. There's still one region that I'm yet to see the targeted plan for what they're doing. But across the network, we are prioritising where we accelerate fitting the tactile surfaces. And certainly over the next 2 years, 2.5 years, we're prioritising those sites where we know there is the greater risk. And that must be our priority.
Can we clarify this issue over the money, though? Department for Transport told us that there's been no figure that's yet been actually finalised to complete these works. I mean, have you or haven't you been promised £10 million?
We have agreed that we will set about planning the work for the remainder of the current control period. That's up until April 2024. And that, we estimate, will be work that costs us £10 million more than we'd already planned to spend on station enhancements. So that work is being planned now and will go ahead. We've had close engagement with ministers and we've agreed the need to accelerate that work.
So you think you're going to get that money?
We're working on those plans. In fact, we've submitted those plans for 4 regions already to the rail regulator.
So do you have a new target date? Because as I said, 28 years is a long time to wait for all the areas to be covered.
There's a massive task to complete the national network. Just to put it in scale, it's something over 400 kilometres of tactile surface needs to be installed. That's on several thousand platforms. So it's important we prioritise. It's important to recognise that we'll do the highest risk first. Those that have got partial tactiles will be first. Those where we know the station is used by blind and partially sighted people will be high on our priority list. It will take us a few years to complete this, but we are absolutely committed. That's what we'll do.
But the Lib Dem group on the London Assembly, which you know have taken a great interest in this, they claim that at the current rate of installation, the goal of stations being fully tactile by 2029 isn't possible. In fact, they even say that to achieve 100% coverage, to do that would require quadrupling the speed of installation. Do you recognise those figures?
So at the current rate, it would have taken us too long to get across the network. That's why we're putting together the plans to accelerate that programme, which means that we've got realistic plans. Some of our regions, and for 2 routes, will have completed the work by June next year. Those are the busy stations down just south of London in Kent and Sussex. And there are other regions who've got clear plans that I've seen that will have us complete this over the next 8 years, 7 to 8 years.
Are there ways in which this work could be done more quickly and more cheaply? I want to quote you an email which repeats a point made to us by a number of listeners after our programme last February, which you appeared on. Alex Sidebottom emailed,
I work for a local authority designing and project managing accessibility improvements at public transport boarding points. I believe that Network Rail could very quickly and cheaply employ resin-based road surfacing, often used for anti-skid properties on many roads around the country. This process, although not as resilient as concrete tactile tiles, could be installed on multiple platforms in the matter of an evening, minimising the disruption even less by only doing part of platforms on one evening, then the other part the following evening. Anti-skid material can be layered to make ridges, dots, or whatever's needed by existing lining companies employed by local authorities, airports, etc. I wonder if this has been considered.
Well, Alan Spence, has it? Or something like it?
Yes, it has. So there's a whole range of different solutions that we can and do use. There is the traditional concrete sections that replace big chunks of the platform surface. And your correspondent there is quite right. They're expensive, they're slower to install, the rate of progress will be less. But they're the right solution in some circumstances, where we're doing a major station overhaul, for example.
Can I just ask you about one other issue, which is away from the actual tactile paving work? There's been a lot of work to improve the programme to provide assistance to blind and partially sighted people, but a number of stations are still unmanned, especially in the evenings and weekends. Is this being addressed?
We know that blind and partially sighted people would, by preference, be able to have safe travel without needing to get other people to assist them. The station operators, the train operating companies, have themselves got some responsibility for the information about which stations are fitted with tactile surfaces and hence enable that independent safe travel, and which ones are not.
Well, we'll continue to watch this all very carefully. Alan Spence, thank you very much for coming on. And that's it for today's programme, but something we'd really like to start doing is getting more of your voices on the show as opposed to us reading out your emails for you. If you'd like to air your opinions, you can leave us a voicemail by calling 0161 836 1338. But of course, if you prefer, we still welcome your emails in touch at bbc.co.uk. From me, Peter Wight, producer Beth Hemmings and studio manager Jonathan Esp, goodbye.